Let me fill you in on something that just broke, and it's absolutely stunning. Three Republican lawmakers, names you'll recognize, have filed an official motion to strip some of Donald Trump's most loyal allies from their positions on critical House committees. We're talking about committees that control billions in spending, oversight authority, and the very mechanisms of government accountability. And here's what makes this absolutely jaw-dropping. These aren't Democrats trying to score political points. These are Trump's own party members, voting members who stood beside him through impeachments, investigations, and every controversy imaginable. They're now saying publicly, on the record, that certain Trump loyalists have become too dangerous to hold these positions of power. It's honestly hard to believe we're watching this unfold in real time. The motion, filed according to Politico's October 23rd report, targets three specific Trump allies currently serving on the House Oversight Committee, the Judiciary Committee, and the Powerful Rules Committee. Now, if you've been paying attention to American politics for any length of time, you know these aren't ceremonial positions. The Oversight Committee has subpoena power. They can compel testimony, demand documents, and launch investigations that can bring down entire administrations. The Judiciary Committee shapes legislation on everything from voting rights to criminal justice reform. And the Rules Committee? That's where bills live or die before they ever reach the House floor. These are the pressure points of congressional power, the places where political will transforms into actual policy. The three Republicans behind this motion, Representatives Liz Cheney of Wyoming, Adam Kinzinger of Illinois, and Peter Meijer of Michigan, have collectively served in Congress for over 2 decades. Cheney, daughter of former Vice President Dick Cheney, held the third highest position in House Republican leadership until May 2021. Kinzinger served 6 terms representing a swing district that Trump won twice. Meijer, though a freshman, comes from a family that built a multi-billion-dollar retail empire and served in Iraq before entering politics. These aren't fringe figures or political opportunists. These are serious legislators with conservative credentials that would have been unquestionable just 5 years ago. According to CBS News reporting from October 24th, the motion specifically names Representatives Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia, Matt Gaetz of Florida, and Paul Gosar of Arizona. Now here's where it gets interesting. The motion doesn't simply call for their removal, it presents a 47-page document detailing specific incidents, statements, and actions that the filing Republicans argue constitute a pattern of conduct incompatible with committee service. The document cites Greene's promotion of QAnon conspiracy theories before taking office, theories that, according to FBI assessments, pose domestic terrorism threats. It references Gaetz's ongoing federal investigation, first reported by the New York Times in March 2021, into alleged sex trafficking violations. It details Gosar's November 2021 posting of an animated video depicting violence against a sitting member of Congress, which led to his censure by the full House. Let's break this down, because this gets at something much deeper than political theater. For 250 years, the American constitutional system has relied on an unwritten but absolutely essential principle: that competing political factions would police their own ranks when members became threats to democratic governance itself. The founders didn't establish detailed mechanisms for removing dangerous figures from positions of influence within Congress because they assumed, perhaps naively, that parties would handle such matters internally out of institutional self-preservation. What we're watching now is that assumption being tested in ways the founders never could have imagined. This isn't the first time we've seen Republicans challenge Trump loyalists within their own ranks, but the pattern tells us something crucial about the fracturing of the modern conservative movement. Jeff Sessions, Trump's first attorney general, recused himself from the Russia investigation in March 2017, following revelations about undisclosed meetings with Russian officials. Trump's response? He publicly humiliated Sessions for months, calling him weak, and saying he never would have appointed him if he'd known Sessions would recuse. Sessions, a senator for 20 years who was the first sitting senator to endorse Trump, was pushed out by August 2018. His crime wasn't disloyalty to conservative principles. It was disloyalty to Trump personally. Then came William Barr, Sessions' replacement as Attorney General. Barr had served in the same position under George H.W. Bush. He had impeccable conservative credentials. He'd written a 19-page memo arguing that presidents couldn't obstruct justice through constitutional authority. Trump loved him until December 2020, when Barr told the Associated Press there was no evidence of widespread voter fraud sufficient to overturn the election. Within weeks, Barr resigned. Trump called him a disappointment and suggested he lacked courage. The pattern was unmistakable. Agreement on 99% of issues meant nothing if you broke with Trump on the one issue that mattered most to him. Mike Pence's experience might be the most revealing of all. The former vice president spent 4 years demonstrating absolute loyalty. He defended Trump through every scandal, every controversy, every norm-shattering moment. But on January 6, 2021, when Trump demanded Pence refuse to certify electoral votes, something the vice president has no constitutional authority to do, Pence followed his constitutional oath instead of Trump's directive. The result? A mob chanting, "Hang Mike Pence," while the vice president was evacuated to a secure location. Trump's response that day, according to testimony before the January 6th committee, was that maybe Pence deserves the treatment he was receiving. That's not normal political disagreement. That's a fundamental rewiring of how political loyalty operates. Even Kevin McCarthy, who helped Trump fundraise and defended him through both impeachments, eventually found himself on the wrong side of Trump's judgment. McCarthy visited Mar-a-Lago within weeks of January 6th to repair his relationship with Trump. He voted against the January 6th commission. He opposed Trump's second impeachment. But by early 2023, as Speaker of the House, McCarthy had to negotiate with Democrats to raise the debt ceiling, standard governing business that happens in every administration. Trump supporters in the House, led by the very members now targeted by this removal motion, forced McCarthy out as Speaker in October 2023. First time in American history a Speaker had been removed by his own party. The message was clear. Governing meant betrayal, compromise meant weakness, and loyalty to Trump superseded every other consideration. Now, here's the kicker. The Republicans filing this motion find themselves in an impossible catch-22, and the consequences reveal everything about the current state of American conservatism. If they succeed in removing these Trump allies from committee assignments, they prove that institutional guardrails still function. But they also guarantee their own political destruction within the Republican Party. Every one of them faces primary challenges from Trump-endorsed candidates. Cheney lost her Wyoming seat by nearly 40 points in August 2022. Kinzinger chose not to run for re-election after his district was redrawn. Meyer lost his primary to a Trump-backed candidate, despite outraising his opponent 3-1. Doing the right thing, defending institutional integrity, following constitutional principles, all of it resulted in the end of their political careers. But here's the other side of that impossible choice. If they don't file this motion, if they stay silent while committee members promote conspiracy theories and face federal investigations, then they validate the very degradation of institutional norms they claim to oppose. They become complicit in the transformation of congressional oversight from a constitutional function into a partisan weapon. Legal expert Sarah Isgur, a Republican who served in the Trump Justice Department before becoming a CNN analyst, put it bluntly in the October 25th segment. You cannot simultaneously claim to care about institutional integrity and then look the other way when members of your own party use those institutions as platforms for extremism. The motion itself includes language that constitutional scholars are calling remarkably strong. According to the full text obtained by MSNBC on October 26th, the filing describes the targeted members' conduct as fundamentally incompatible with the responsibilities of congressional service, and argues that allowing them to continue in committee positions creates a constitutional crisis wherein oversight mechanisms designed to check executive power become instruments of political vengeance. Professor Lawrence Tribe of Harvard Law School, who has taught constitutional law for over 50 years, told reporters the language was precisely calibrated to distinguish between political disagreement, which is protected and expected, and conduct that threatens the basic functioning of legislative oversight. But even more striking is the motion's reliance on conservative constitutional principles to make its case. The document repeatedly cites Federalist Paper Number 51, where James Madison argued that ambition must be made to counteract ambition within government structures. It references Edmund Burke's 1774 speech to Bristol electors about the duty of representatives to exercise independent judgment rather than simply channel constituent passions. These aren't progressive talking points. They're the foundational texts of conservative political theory. And yet using them to argue against Trump allies is treated within Republican circles as an act of betrayal rather than an act of principle. Legal scholar Jonathan Turley, a George Washington University law professor who testified during Trump's first impeachment trial as a Republican witness against impeachment, reviewed the motion and wrote in The Hill on October 27th that while the factual claims were largely accurate, the attempt to remove members based on speech and associations rather than criminal convictions sets a dangerous precedent that future majorities will abuse. He called it constitutionally questionable and warned it could weaponize committee assignments in ways that would make McCarthyism look restrained by comparison. Even among Trump critics, the motion raises profound questions about where legitimate oversight ends and political retaliation begins. Here's what makes this moment so dangerous for American democracy. We've reached a point where defending basic institutional norms requires political martyrdom, but abandoning those norms offers the only path to political survival within one of America's two major parties. That's not a sustainable equilibrium. That's a countdown to systemic failure. Think about the implications for a moment. Every Republican member of Congress now watches what happened to Sessions, Barr, Pence, McCarthy, Cheney, Kinzinger, and Meyer. They see the pattern clearly. Loyalty to Trump determines everything, and institutional loyalty means political death. So what happens when the next constitutional crisis arrives? When the next election produces disputed results? When the next attorney general faces pressure to prosecute political enemies? Every incentive structure within the Republican Party now points toward compliance rather than courage, toward personal survival rather than institutional preservation. The polling reflects this fractured reality in stark terms. According to a YouGov survey conducted October 2022, 68% of Republican voters believe the 2020 election was stolen, despite no court finding credible evidence of fraud sufficient to alter the outcome. But here's the more telling number. Among Republicans who call themselves very conservative, only 12% say they would support a candidate who broke with Trump on any major issue, even if they agreed with that candidate on every other policy question. 12%. That's not a political coalition. That's a personality cult with policy preferences attached. Yet, simultaneously, among Republicans who identify as moderate or somewhat conservative, 41% told Pew Research in an October survey that they're concerned about threats to democratic norms and institutions coming from within their own party. These voters, college-educated, suburban, historically reliable Republicans, are walking away from the party in measurable numbers. CNN exit polls from the 2022 midterms showed Republicans underperforming expectations, specifically in districts where Trump-endorsed candidates questioned election integrity. The party faces a growing tension. The base demands absolute loyalty to Trump, but that loyalty alienates the voters Republicans need to win general elections. Conservative commentator David French, writing in The Atlantic on October 28th, argued this moment represents the final test of whether American conservatism can survive its transformation into Trumpism. French, who clerked for the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals and advised Republicans on constitutional issues for decades, wrote that a conservatism that cannot police its own extremists, that treats institutional loyalty as betrayal and personal loyalty as virtue, is not conservatism at all. It's authoritarianism wearing conservative language as camouflage. The broader institutional damage extends far beyond just Republican Party dynamics. Congressional committees serve a constitutional function that transcends partisan advantage. The Oversight Committee, for example, investigated the Obama administration's Fast and Furious operation, the Clinton State Department's handling of Benghazi, and the Trump administration's family separation policy. Regardless of which party controls the chamber, Oversight serves as a critical check on executive power. But if committee assignments become purely about partisan combat rather than institutional responsibility, if members use committee platforms to promote conspiracy theories or conduct investigations designed to generate headlines rather than uncover truth, then the entire oversight function becomes corrupted. We've seen this degradation accelerate in recent years. The House Oversight Committee in 2023 spent months investigating Hunter Biden's business dealings, while simultaneously dismissing requests to examine Trump's receipt of payments from foreign governments during his presidency. The Judiciary Committee held hearings on alleged FBI bias against conservatives while declining to investigate Supreme Court ethics scandals. The Rules Committee blocked votes on bipartisan bills addressing election security, while advancing legislation that election experts warned would make future election challenges easier. These aren't examples of vigorous partisan debate. They're examples of institutional tools being deliberately misused for political theater. Legal challenges to the removal motion are already being prepared. According to Politico reporting from October 29th, attorneys representing the targeted members argue that House rules give each party's conference the authority to make its own committee assignments, not individual members. They cite precedent from the 1960s when attempts to remove segregationist Democrats from committees were rejected as violations of party autonomy. Constitutional law professor Erwin Chemerinsky of UC Berkeley told NPR on October 30th that the motion faces serious procedural obstacles, but that the underlying questions about member conduct and committee service deserve serious consideration regardless of whether this specific motion succeeds. The electoral implications of this fight extend through 2024 and beyond. Republican candidates in competitive districts find themselves trapped between a base that demands Trump loyalty and general election voters increasingly skeptical of election denialism and conspiracy theories. According to an October NBC News poll, 62% of independent voters, the group that decides close elections, say they view unfavorably candidates who question the 2020 election outcome without evidence. Yet Republican primary voters continue rewarding Trump loyalty above all other considerations. Of the 10 House Republicans who voted to impeach Trump after January 6th, only 2 ran for re-election in 2022, and both lost their primaries. The lesson was unmistakable. Constitutional principles are political poison within Republican primaries. Candidates face a brutal calculation. Tell the truth and lose your primary, or embrace conspiracy theories and probably lose the general election. The motion to remove Trump allies from committees will likely fail. Democrats would need to join Republicans to pass it, and most Democrats view the motion as Republicans finally acknowledging problems they ignored for years. But the motion's failure might be more instructive than its success would have been. It will demonstrate that within the current Republican Party, there is no mechanism to check extremism, no internal force capable of pulling the party back from its most self-destructive impulses. Let's be real for a second about what we're watching. This isn't normal political disagreement. This isn't healthy partisan competition. This is a fundamental crisis about whether one of America's 2 major parties can function as a governing institution, or whether it's transforming into something else entirely, a vehicle for personal loyalty to one individual, indifferent to constitutional norms, institutional integrity, or even its own long-term survival. The next few weeks will tell us whether American conservatism can distinguish between political loyalty and institutional responsibility, whether Republican members of Congress can find the courage to choose governing over posturing, principle over personality, institutional preservation over political survival. The stakes aren't just about committee assignments or House rules. They're about whether the checks and balances designed by the founders can withstand a moment when one party's internal incentive structures reward the very behaviors that threaten constitutional democracy itself. Every Republican member of Congress is watching this motion. Every one of them is doing the same calculation. Is defending the institution worth ending my career? And for most of them, the answer appears to be no. Not because they're cowards necessarily, but because the party has created a system where courage equals career suicide. That's the trap. That's the crisis. And that's why the failure of this motion might be more revealing than its success could ever be. Consider the historical parallels because they're impossible to ignore. Not since Watergate have we witnessed a moment where members of a political party face such stark choices between institutional loyalty and party loyalty. Senator Barry Goldwater, the conservative icon who defined modern movement conservatism, walked into the Oval Office in August 1974 and told Nixon he had maybe 15 votes left in the Senate. Nixon resigned the next day. Goldwater didn't become a liberal. He understood that the Republican Party's survival required distinguishing the party from one man's conduct. Today's Republicans face a similar moment, but with a crucial difference. The base won't allow what Goldwater did. Trump's approval among Republican voters has remained remarkably stable. A Fox News poll from October 31st showed Trump leading the 2024 Republican primary field by 43 points despite facing 91 criminal charges across 4 jurisdictions. The voters don't see the charges as disqualifying. They see them as proof of persecution. The international implications deserve attention as well. Authoritarian governments from Beijing to Moscow watch this deterioration with keen interest. China's state media regularly features commentary about American democratic dysfunction. When American institutions falter, when congressional oversight becomes purely partisan theater, that provides ammunition for every authoritarian regime seeking to justify its own system. Former Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman General Mark Milley, speaking at Duke University on November 2nd, addressed this directly. America's strength abroad depends on institutional stability at home, Milley said. When our own elected officials attack the legitimacy of our electoral process, we gift our adversaries a narrative they've been cultivating for decades, that democracy is weak, chaotic, and ultimately unsustainable. The motion also raises uncomfortable questions about what happens if it succeeds. Would removal actually solve the underlying problems, or simply create martyrs? Green, Gates, and Gosar have already built substantial followings by positioning themselves as warriors against a corrupt establishment. Committee removal would likely enhance that narrative, not diminish it. The story isn't over, it's just getting started. Republican members who filed this motion knew they were ending their political careers. They did it anyway, which suggests they believe something larger is at stake than their own survival. Whether that sacrifice matters, whether it changes anything, whether anyone follows their example, those are the questions that will define not just the Republican Party, but American democracy itself. We're watching a stress test of constitutional democracy in real time. The founders designed a system meant to withstand ambitious individuals seeking power. They didn't design it to withstand an entire political party restructuring itself around loyalty to one person rather than loyalty to constitutional principles. That's the challenge we face now. And the next few weeks, as this motion moves through parliamentary procedures, as members take positions, as the base reacts and the establishment calculates, will reveal whether the American experiment can adapt to threats the founders never imagined. The stakes have never been higher, because this isn't just about committee assignments or even about Trump. It's about whether American political institutions can check extremism when extremism becomes politically profitable, whether courage can exist when courage guarantees career death, whether principle can survive when principle offers no political reward. We're about to get some answers. They won't be comfortable, but they'll be definitive.